DAO due diligence today. The reason why I know a thing or two about DAOs is because of my last role with a company called StableLab, where we focus on decentralized governance, mainly for DeFi protocols. And there I was part of the project DAO Leader, which is the first scoring index for DAOs in the space, which I developed as head of product. And today also Anne, our research lead, is here. Our former research lead is here, which is really nice. So I'm going to mention her a couple of times when we're diving into the scoring index later. But yeah, I also organized ETH Lisbon, the hackathon that was happening last year, as part of the core team. And I'm doing She Crypto, which is a community for professionals female professionals in the Web3 space. Okay, let's dive into it. It's just a bit weird that you're sitting there and the laptop is here, but I hope I'm not in the way of the slides. Does it work? Just give me a second. Okay. Alright. So, starting with DAOs. Since pretty much 2013, they are the embodiment of the spirit of decentralization, self-sovereignty, community, which is all crucial to Ethereum and its founding principles, right? But at the same time, what I always find interesting is to think about whether it's also a viable alternative to traditional business models. And the question really also is, who cares about governance? I think we can all agree that governance is really time-consuming, and you potentially are also not the people who are voting yourself or writing proposals or participating in the governance. Maybe you are not even delegating your tokens to prominent delegates in the space. There are also a few professional delegates. And with that, keeping your voting rights to yourself. So maybe moreover, you also don't really care about how decentralized the protocols that you're using are in reality. And if not, that's really okay. But there are some good reasons to care about governance, and I'll tell you why. So, in a business context, first of all, governance hinders growth because it's more of a general obstacle rather than a quick revenue boost for projects, especially in the DeFi space. But after all, having proper governance frameworks really ensures that the overall growth in the Web3 ecosystem does not hamper the founding principles of Ethereum, which stand for decentralization, right? So, having had a lot of growth in the last years that brought a lot of new players to the Web3 ecosystem, and many of them don't really stand for decentralization and brought with them the concepts of centralization and use decentralization more as a brand, which is the reality of many DeFi protocols today. And the focus here is then again to just extract the maximum value from Web3 communities. So I think for this conversation it is also helpful to go and take a step back and agree what it actually means to operate in a decentralized way. So a decentralized structure means that the power over the decision making is given to an organization's community, which is again represented by the governance token holders, mostly. And next to the shareholders, the users and the individual investors receive the decision-making rights over aspects such as company treasury, revenue, operation, strategy, but also policy, and so on and so forth. At the same time, we know that most protocols are not really decentralized, or at least not fully decentralized. At least most companies launch as a normal company, not as a DAO in the beginning, and then they try to set up a DAO later on, which first takes time and second is quite complex. So achieving a full elimination of the central authorities in DAOs can be very, very challenging, which is also the reason that there are not so many out there today. But we always look at MakerDAO as like the prime example for conducting the governance the way they do. So here we have a quick overview of the DAO landscape, which is a bit old. It's from 2021, but I think you get the gist. There are always many new DAOs launching on a regular basis, so it's a bit difficult to do a categorization, but we're usually talking about 8 general buckets, which many of you will also be familiar with. But what's more interesting about that is that many of these DAOs experience similar operational, technical, and governance challenges. Which brings us already to the next topic, which is the problems that DAO really face. And the main problem here is that devs really can't fix this. So, as I said, DAOs face operational and governance challenges because they are using still maturing technology to address all of their changing and evolving stakeholder interests. And right now, in real time, they are exploring how they can scale in size, in scope, and in sophistication while maintaining their flat and decentralized structures. And there is just a very small sample size to look at when you're talking about like good practices, maybe around 50, and there's no real governance framework for them also to follow for guidance. So it's a lot of experimentation in this space, and while Anne and I were conducting a lot of research, it was also clear that no one really knows what they are doing. We're just, trying the best, experimenting on the front, figuring out new solutions and the way we can innovate things. But this is quite interesting to know, at least when you're talking about DAOs and you want to understand how DAOs actually operate. So this brings us already to the things that we can potentially solve in this area and the questions that we all need to ask ourselves when we're talking about DAOs or when we're operating DAOs, when we're participating in DAOs. And the first one is how can we compare DAOs against each other, which is important for users, contributors, but also retail investors. How can we do informed decision making if we can't compare them against each other at the same time? Then how can we rate the governance maturity of the DAOs, which also goes hand in hand with the organizational maturity and the organizational health of the DAOs? And how can we highlight the areas of organizational risk? And lastly, establish best practices and governance standards in Web3, which goes back to having benchmarks and guidance for new DAOs for launch. And I think Anne is probably getting flashbacks from all the good times and the trauma we had from developing DAO Meter and conducting this research, looking into all of the DeFi protocols, which we had to do manually. So yeah, our answer was at Stable Lab we developed a scoring index with a goal to quantify governance maturity in DAOs. I'm going to tell you a bit about that more, but the end goal is to establish best practices and governance standards in Web3, and then to promote these using the scientific backed framework, which I would say is proper research of what is also not happening a lot. I'm going to briefly tell you about the research overview and the framework that we used. So as you can see, we went through an odyssey to find out. We started off with the external data, which were the DAOs to generate dimensions, which we then generated abstractions from. And I'm not going to bore you today with a deeper dive into the research framework, but just so you know, those included interviews, surveys, quantitative computations, and qualitative case study. And if you have any specific questions regarding the research framework, you can read our 40 pages report on that, which is also online, or ask Anne any questions. So yeah, let's talk about measuring DAOs then. The way that we define the organizational maturity of DAOs, specifically DeFi DAOs, was a quantifiable indicator of a DAO's ability to operate effectively and sustainably over the long term. So a crucial element of this metric is the application of decentralized governance mechanisms that enable organizational resilience and the effective administration of resources, procedures, and human capital for the DAO to meet its objectives. Those were the 6 overarching governance categories that we established to be crucial for this research framework and to organizational maturity of DAOs. We have community, documentation, treasury, proposal, security, and voting. And to all of those, we have 30 subcategories, which I'm not going to dive into. You can look them up all online, but just so you know a little bit what we're talking about. If you just look at the DAO, DAO's documentation, let's say MakerDAO, Aave, or 1inch, or so whatsoever, then we would score all of these subcategories. And yeah, a real DAO technically needs to have financial reporting public, for example, which is the case for DeFi protocols such as MakerDAO, Aave, and Uniswap. And the same counts for the tokenomics. And they should make governance accessible to all, and the documents for the process needs to be public so everyone can be onboarded and participate as a contributor. And yeah, the same counts for code, should be then open source if according to the framework. And yeah, if you want to check out the other 30 subcategories that I'm not going to mention, it's all online. It's basically public good for the DeFi space, because most of that information to normal users is impossible to gain. It's very difficult to get an overview of what's actually happening and how these DAOs work. So that's that. And now, instead of going through that, I wanted to look at some DAO security concerns with you. In general, DAOs have evolved already a lot, and with that also matured, but there are still a lot of security challenges that they face. And we all know how painful hacks are, I think. According to Hacken, we already had over $1 billion US dollars stolen only in Q2 and in Q3 of this year, which is very painful. And yeah, some of the top concerns for DAOs in regards to security are around smart contracts, treasury, lack of regulation, and governance, which comes with many sub-concerns. And today I'm just going to talk a bit more about the last 2. So yeah, let's start with the lack of regulation. The thing is that DAOs pose real challenges to regulators, and it's not really clear which path they will take in the future, in which way they will treat DAOs. There's a question whether they will just treat DAOs as other incorporate entities, which would probably would be the easiest solution for them. But as long as DAOs are not legally recognized, they also just have no limited liability protection. And yeah, this basically affects the liabilities of all the members of the DAO and all the delegates and yeah, other legal aspects. Many DAOs today fall into a partnership status because they cannot be incorporated, which imposes again unlimited liability to their members. And after all, what I just wanted to make clear with this is that we don't know where DAOs fall in the regulatory landscape yet. So participants in DAOs may not fully understand also their rights and their responsibilities today. A good example is Europe. We're all in Portugal now, right? I think you might have heard about MiCA, which was launched in April, which is the markets and crypto assets regulation that we have in Europe. And it now applies to centralized or partly centralized entities. And as I've just demonstrated before, most DAOs are and DeFi protocols are not fully decentralized, and the regulators, of course, know that as well. They didn't really decide on like a regulation for DAOs yet, because they want to observe a bit more like what is happening in the crypto space and how the DAO space also is evolving in the future. But what is happening is that they are already exploring, of course, the next iteration for the MiCA regulation, and they are also already talking about whether they should just treat DAOs as regular entities. I think that's all I wanted to say about this. One thing just wanted to mention on the side, what's quite interesting, what has recently happened is a few days ago, Abu Dhabi actually launched a proper regulation framework for DAOs, which allows them to operate without any uncertainty. And this was lack of legal frameworks, and the second part around DAO security I wanted to focus on is governance, because we haven't talked about it enough yet, right? So let's start with notifications. You wouldn't really think so, but notifications are really important for the governance of a DAO and of DeFi protocols, because there's just so much happening in the forums and behind the scenes that you need to inform all members to vote if there's a new proposal that's about to pass. And so if attackers would be able to block notifications, they could introduce and pass proposals, and a DAO therefore should always audit and analyze all their proposals. Then the next thing is bad configuration of the DAO in general, which is just basically an incorrect setup from scratch. So there's a potential for wrong thresholds and time locks and poorly designed incentives, which then has an effect that is maybe unintended for the token and the DAO and the general purpose of it. Spam is another important one, which is particularly a problem on gasless sidechains. It can disrupt the front ends and prevent members from filtering valid and invalid proposals. A quite prominent one is governance attacks. There has been this example where Tron attempted to borrow COM tokens for a proposal on Compound, which is basically taking out loans to vote on proposals or leverage large sums of capital to manipulate on-chain governance. And also there's the potential for behind-the-door coalitions, where the community is just like a group of friends or a handful of wallets. And lastly, member apathy. If you don't have like an active community behind a DAO, then you don't have thorough reviews, and you don't have enough participation, basically, which is, in my opinion, also one of the most important reasons to work together with professional delegates in the space, because you can't really expect decentralization when you have a bunch of people participating in the governance of a highly complex protocol that just don't understand what it's about, or don't have also the time to consume all of the important news. And yeah, that's about that. So yeah, now already jumping to the conclusion, I think DAOs are capable of rapid pooling and deployment of capital, and with the right coding they can automate most business processes too. But yeah, it's all not that simple, and it's all not that decentralized for sure. Thank you.
Let's open for questions.
Yeah. So DAOs actually do fall under simple partnerships. So there is regulation for DAOs with current laws.
Yes.
You can sue a DAO.
Yeah, I also mentioned that that's the problem, right? That DAOs fall under partnerships quite often. But then you also have the topic around jurisdictions again, because often DAO members are like from around the globe, and then it's not really clear like under which jurisdiction they will fall. So as I mentioned before, like MiCA, for example, does not cover DAOs yet. Abu Dhabi, for example, does cover DAOs yet. And yeah, that's basically all I want to say. Also, like I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really like give you a final answer to the legal situation around DAOs. And I think also we have like another DAO expert sitting here with Tamara from CommonsTech. But generally there is a lot of uncertainty around the legal situation. So the partnership, is categorization is just not like a final solution to it, and yeah, not safe enough for all contributors and members.
No, there's also some states in the US where DAOs are regulated, but if I think Wyoming and Delaware. But if I start a partnership with somebody in, I don't know, Slovakia, that is already existing. So again, the way you can go after a DAO is nothing new from what is already existing. And even if I do this collaboration with somebody in Slovakia and the service was provided in Portugal and Slovakia, it's the same difficulty as with a DAO. So
I think it's worth factoring in a lot of DAO participants are anonymous.
yes, but in the end it's all people. And I think especially with AI, we're able to trace a lot of the anonymous behavior online.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Because your public key is way more public than your IBAN will ever be. So.
Yeah,
I think law enforcement might be catching up with that, but I don't know whether it's so easy to find an anonymous person today, or to have, I'm from New York, to go to the court in New York and say, I'd like you to sue this address. I think the court would laugh me out today, but eventually there will be more ways for DAOs to register. Of course, Wyoming, like you said, is one of the states in the US where you can register an LLC as a DAO, but that is forthcoming. It's not here yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the question and the info you added. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I think we can agree that the DAO are quite immature in terms of a space. I was looking, even in my view, when we put like Maker or Aave as maybe the more mature DAO, we can still see that token holder are voting for, or are supposed to vote for a bit everything, like some risk parameters that can be like really specific a topic. My question is, in the future, should we have this still level of flat hierarchy, or should we see in DAO some specialization, like with some committee that are dealing with risk parameters, I guess that's a bit what we are seeing with professional delegates. So what are your view on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this is also what will define a bit the success of the whole DAO ecosystem, and committees are a good way to go, and in my opinion, but I might also be biased, is professional delegates are a great solution at this point. There are also quite some funds who spin off like their own governance department to take care of, for example, their investment portfolio. They will also be highly specialized, but yeah, I agree with what you just said. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Yes, Tamara?
I have. Yeah, I've been involved with DAOs, multiple different DAOs for a few years now, and there's so many pain points, and they're so immature, and there's, I think the positive thing is that it's a very broad place for experimenting. I think of it as a laboratory to experiment with capital formation and governance and alternative methods of self-governing and anonymity and markets. You guys have done a lot of work and analyzed a lot of DAOs. What did you guys see as the use case that has the most maturity today?
So, personally, I think the use case for DAOs that is the most interesting is around DeFi protocols, just because that's where financial primitives are always present, and like the outcomes of the decision making is carrying like the most consequences. But yeah, I'm not sure whether you mean with mature use cases, whether the use of like a DAO is like the best, or yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Sort of. I mean, I think of DAOs that are figuring out like how to decentralize their community. So exit to community is like an example of a use case. Foundations that start centralized, amass a lot of capital, and then want to exit to their community and make ownership of the treasury and the decision-making process very decentralized. That's one of the use cases that I see many organizations are trying. More success, less success, but I still think we're in a lab.
Definitely, we are in a lab. Like the last time that I've been working in the space, definitely felt like a lot of experimentation. And yeah, we were always, my two former business partners were with MakerDAO before, so we always looked at Maker really as like the prime example of how you can carry out your operations in the most decentralized manner if you really want to. And I think you can also see with Maker, they have been pivoting in all different directions over the last year. They've been changing the whole setup. His name is Du. He's always been one of the main delegates for the most voting rights there. And what I've been hearing from him, it's just been a total mess, right? At this point, like, you need people who are full-time committed for MakerDAO, for example. But yeah, thanks for the great questions, everyone, and for being here today. I hope you liked the talk, and I wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you.